I'm Nura, welcome to my channel. I'm here with another analog photography video for this week, and I will be talking about multi-exposures. Like I said, today I will be talking about multi and double exposures, and the reason for that is it is one of my favorite techniques in analog photography that I've come to love since I was introduced to lomography over 10 years ago. And also I have received some questions regarding these techniques, so today you can consider this more like an introduction to multi and double exposures, and I'll be talking about the general reasoning and logic behind it and how to select the settings in your camera accordingly. And in the upcoming videos, I will be talking about different multi-exposure techniques such as ghosting or film swaps. So I hope you enjoy this introduction, and if you don't want to miss any of the upcoming videos, if you haven't done so, make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button. So I will see you back here again next week. Anyways, let's get to our topic at hand, which is multi and double exposures. And as the name suggests, it is the technique where you expose the film more than once to get a mixture of images onto it. And it is quite an easy technique and fun technique if your camera allows you to do so. One of my favorite cameras is the Lomo LCA Plus. And in the Lomo LCA Plus, you can do multi-exposures. In the original one, you can't. And the reason is once you press the shutter, the camera, unless you wind your film forward, does not allow you to press it again. And in the Plus version, you have this MX button. And when you pull it down, it allows you to take a second photo on top of the first, or a third or a fourth photo on top of it. And once you're done taking your photos, you can just wind your film forward. And most of the lomography cameras allow you to do this via a button like this, or just totally separate shutter and winding systems. So like the LCA Plus or the Lomo Instant Automat or the Lomo Instant or the Sardina Fisheye 2 all have this MX button that allows you to do multi or double exposures. And Sprocket Rocket, Diana Mini or Diana F Plus does not have this, but they have totally separated systems for shutter and winding. So once you press the shutter once, you can actually press it again and again and again as much as you want before winding your film. And then there are some cameras such as my Leica that does not allow you in either case. So once I press this, the camera doesn't let me press it again, and there's no button to confuse the camera, sort of, to let me do it. So I'll talk about how you can do it with that camera later on, but now I want to talk about the technique in general. Like I said, multi or double exposures is exposing the film more than once. And I have talked in previous videos about different camera settings and what shutter speed is and what aperture is and what film ISO speed is. And the correct lighted image comes from a combination of all these things. And like if I'm shooting indoors right here, then I have to select either a high ISO film or set the other settings accordingly so that I get a nicely lighted image. And when you're doing multiple or double exposures, this changes a little bit because you will be exposing the film to light more than once. Let's say that you're doing a double exposure, which means two photos on top of each other, and you are using a camera like this. So in here, I have my film speed setting, and this week I did a few multi-exposures with this Ilford 400 ISO film. And in this one, normally I would set my camera to 400 in order to get a good lighted image. But since I was gonna do double exposure, so expose the film twice, I changed it to 800. So once 800, and then the second time 800, means that I'm getting the exposure equivalent of 400 speed film. In other cameras, what you can do is change your shutter speed or the aperture. So if I was normally gonna shoot at f8, I would switch it to f16 in order to let less light into the camera at one time. Or if I was gonna change my shutter speed, let's say I was gonna use 250th of a second, I would switch it up to 500 of a second. So like double it up or down, whichever way you see it. So like here, if I was to shoot, like I said, 250, I would go one up to 500. And that would allow me to shoot two images on top of each other with, again, the same perfect exposure as I would get from once. Or if I was gonna do it 3 times, then I would set it to 1000. So it would let less light in, but since I'm gonna be exposing it more times, that would equal each other out. So that's the main principle behind multi or double exposures. Just knowing how many times you're gonna expose your film to light so that you can actually set the camera settings accordingly. Like I said, like if I'm gonna shoot it twice, then I think of the film speed as double and then do everything else according to that. So that's the main reason, not reason, but main principle in order to get nicely lighted images. Another thing is knowing what's gonna be more visible on top of what. And in my experience, what you shoot first or second doesn't really matter if they're in the same exact light condition, sort of. Like I tried these, and this film is actually the leftover last 2 squares from my masking video. So they have the hand-drawn clouds here, but here in this one I shot myself first and then the flowers, and flowers first then myself, and pretty much in both cases the flowers being brighter are more visible in the image. So like I said, in my experience that doesn't really matter much. But another example I tried in this film was, I'm gonna show it to you shortly here, and I shot a bunch of fir leaves, like bushes sort of, and they were really dark green, and I shot them first and then myself on top of it, and then I shot myself first and then the leaves, and the first one with the leaves first ended up pretty much obscuring me and letting the leaves take over the image. And the reason for that is actually in the negative films, what happens when you expose a photo is that the dark things that your eyes see end up being light in the negative. So normally I would see the sky as a lighter color when I'm looking out, and the trees being more like a darker silhouette because they're dark brown, almost blackish in terms of black and white. But here, I'm trying to make it more visible, but doesn't really work. Anyways, what happens is the trees end up being white and the sky ends up being almost black. And that affects the way the film basically reacts to light. And like I said, in the negative films, what you see dark ends up being light, and what you see light ends up being dark on the negative. And because of that, the things you expose first and second matter a little bit. And let me just show you the example to make it more sense. I talked about the settings that you need to consider in order to get a nicely lighted multi or double exposure. And I also talked a little bit about the cameras that allow you to do this right away, so letting you take more than one shot on top of the other. But what if your camera didn't let you do that, such as my Leica? In this one, once I press the shutter, there's no going back. There's no redoing. There's no MX button. So the camera totally doesn't let me do a multi or double exposure by itself. And in that case, what I need to do is something similar to what I did in my EBS exposing both sides video. So I load up my film, let's say this one, and shoot it. And then once I finish the film, I rewind it and making sure that this tip is outside. And from then on, what I can do is either load it back into the same camera and or loading it into a different camera. In that case, if I hadn't marked my film before and I just put it in, shot the entire thing, took it out and put it in, let's say, my Sprocket Rocket, which this shoots regular rectangles, whereas that one shoots panoramic with the holes even exposed. What would happen is I would end up getting a mixture of images, almost endless. And that would, of course, drive the person who's scanning your images crazy. But it would also have a very cool effect on the results. So let me just show you some examples that are crazy mixture of like endless images. So you've seen these, and if it's not your cup of tea, or if you don't want to drive the guy who scans your negatives crazy because you need his skills again, what you can do is when you first load the film in, you can mark it like I did in my EBS video. And what I mean by that is actually, let me just show you here. So once I put my film in, what I can do is, like here I already marked it. What I did was, in my Leica, the easiest way I would know that the images would line up with each other is if I see this part and also here the last one, because I don't really see the first sprocket hole that latches, which is inside here. So for me, marking it like this is the easiest to know where the first square lines up, so that once I reload the film, I can load it exactly the same, which would ensure that I would get images on top of the other one. So even though the camera doesn't allow me to do it like that, by carefully loading the film in the exact same spots that I marked initially, I would get overlapping images without the hassle of like that endless combination. And in this one, as I said, I don't see the first hole here, so I would mark the parts that I see. But in my if mine was a camera like the SCA, wow, I can't get this film out. Okay, here we go. If my camera was like the SCA, and if I was seeing the sprocket holes that go in, then I would actually mark it differently. So I would like pull this here, and I would mark this part, and again this part, and then maybe draw a circle, square here. And when I reloaded the film, I would make sure that those line up. So the important thing is actually based on your camera and your understanding, to mark the film in a way that you will know where the first square was, the first image was, and then reload it exactly the same way. So like I said, for this one, I would definitely mark here to know which the hole that went in there in the first latch, and then I would mark it here so that I know how much to pull out, and then maybe mark it here so that I know that the square lines up exactly the same. And if those don't make sense to you, do whatever makes sense, but just make sure that if you want the images to be exactly on top of each other, even though your camera doesn't allow it, make sure that you mark the film and then make sure that it lines up perfectly. And let's see some examples of perfectly lined up images that are not like crazy long. So this is pretty much it. It's all I want to mention in this more beginning type video. And in the upcoming videos, like I said in the beginning, I will be talking about different techniques like the ghosting, or how you can do multi-exposure with other people via film swaps. So I hope you enjoyed this, and stay tuned for those as well. And if you have any questions or things that are I haven't mentioned yet, just drop me a line in the comments and I'll get back to you. Otherwise, I hope to see you here next week. Bye.